أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه تعالى نستعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear respected viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of the I.M.A.M organization, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today titled The Contributions of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. I'd like to also congratulate you on the auspicious occasion of the blessed Wilada of the Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah, salawatullahi alayhi wa alih, as well as our sixth Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam on the 17th of Rabi' al-Awwal. Today, we celebrate the birth of the seal of messengers by in fact remembering and learning about none other than his grandson, who is blessed to share the same birthday. For surely the legacy of the Prophet extends through the infallible Imams from his lineage, and most notably our sixth holy Imam. For in the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he said, أولنا محمد وأوسطنا محمد وآخرنا محمد وكلنا محمد. Our first is Muhammad, our middle is Muhammad, our last is Muhammad, and we are all Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam is revered by both mainstream Sunni and Shia Muslims for his deep Islamic scholarship, piety, and academic accomplishments. Not only is the Imam most renowned as the initiator of Islamic fiqh, his extensive knowledge in a variety of fields had a great academic impact on the people of his time and further beyond. Today, we will together explore three unique dimensions in the accomplishments of the Imam. The first dimension that we will discuss is the contribution in theology, facing atheism, ignorance, and polytheism, as well as the presentation of Islam logically alongside the human intellect. The second dimension we will discuss is the Imam's contribution in fiqh, jurisprudence, that is, developing qualified jurists and standing against both extremist groups. And the third dimension we will discuss will be about human values, morality, and self-identity in a multicultural society through tangible examples from the seerah, the life of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Brothers and sisters, we are joined today by two respected guest speakers. Our first speaker is Shaykh Dr. Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Ninowy, who is an American Syrian scholar tracing his lineage back to the Holy Prophet, salawatullahi alayhi wa alih. He is the founder and director of Madina Institute Islamic Seminary based in Atlanta, Georgia, with campuses in South Africa, UK, Norway, and Malaysia. He has been a pioneer working on grassroots levels to bring back unconditional compassion and love as the central themes of religion, and has been the forerunner promoting non-violence among all people and religions worldwide. Shaykh al-Ninowy holds a bachelor's degree in microbiology from the University of Illinois and a Doctor of Medicine degree. He also obtained his PhD degree in religion with a focus on Islamic studies from the University of Georgia. Shaykh al-Ninowy is considered a muhaddith, essentially a scholar in hadith sciences. We are also joined today by our second speaker, Sayyid Dr. Sulayman Ali Hassan, who was born in Medina, New York, and growing up, he attended several religious classes at the Hawza al-Ilmiya at Wali al-Asr in New York. After graduating from the University of Buffalo with a degree in business administration, he proceeded to the seminary in Qom in 1997, and there Sayyid Sulayman specialized in fiqh and history, and he returned to the US in 2007. Since then, he has served as a religious director at the Baytul Ilm Academy and as the president of Ahlul Bayt Islamic Seminary in Illinois. He also serves as the religious director of the I.M.A.M Al-Asr Islamic Seminary in Alexandria, Virginia. Sayyid Sulayman also holds a PhD in Near Eastern Studies from the University of Chicago. As mentioned a few minutes ago, we will highlight three different dimensions of accomplishments of our Imam, and this will take place through a panel discussion. Each speaker will have approximately 8 minutes to speak at the end at each of these dimensions. And at the conclusion of our discussion this evening, we will open the floor for a Q&A session. We ask our audience to please send your questions through the Zoom chat. Without further ado, let us start with the first dimension, which focuses on the Imam's contribution in the area of theology and countering atheism and polytheism. The science of theology is especially important today, brothers and sisters, considering the increasing trends of atheism worldwide. A recent review of global studies on atheism show that there are approximately 450 to 500 million atheists and agnostics worldwide, which consists of 7% of the world's population, with China having the most atheists in the world. And nowadays, people are asking a lot of questions and having many doubts even among the Muslims. That said, we will start with Sayyid Sulayman. Please go ahead and share your thoughts about this topic.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to all of you. Peace be with you and the blessings of Allah. My particular congratulations to all members of the Muslim Ummah and all of humanity on the very blessed occasion of the birth of our Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa alihi and his illustrious grandson, I.M.A.M. Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. These are two of the figures that we are inspired by as Muslims, and inshallah we will discuss some of the aspects of the teachings of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam today. Shaykh Ninowy, with your permission, I will say a few words, inshallah. Because we have a very limited time, there is not going to be the opportunity to give a great deal of detail and evidence, but just to make a few initial points, inshallah, the goal is that we think about some of the lessons that we learn from these illustrious figures in our Islamic history, and who are not just historical figures, but their knowledge and their teachings are alive, and therefore they are alive amongst us through the lessons and the teachings that we derive from them. And if we want our ummah, our community to be alive, then it is going to be through keeping these teachings in our hearts and on our tongues and in our practice. That is the essential requirement. We're going to focus in our discussion, inshallah, and in the questions on the personality of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. But of course, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq was not an individual. He was part of a family, the purified and the blessed family of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. And so when we speak of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, I don't want to be referring to an individual, but rather to somebody who represented a certain approach to the practice and the understanding and the study of Islam. And that approach is the approach of our Prophet and his family. It is not something that is originated by Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. It is something that he inherited and that he spread. And so this will also be an opportunity for us to better understand the practice and the teaching of the family of the Prophet as a whole. Ahlul Baytin Nabi or Ahlul Baytin Nubuwa, the family of the Prophet, but also the family of prophethood and those who preserved the heritage of the prophetic teaching. So when it comes to theology in particular, I want to make just a few points. The first point that I want to make is that theological debates can be very vicious. And that's something that's true of many different religions. If you study the history of Christianity, then you know that there were differences about the nature of God, the nature of what we call Prophet Isa alayhi salam, that the Christians have a different belief about Prophet Isa. And some of those debates on points of doctrine or belief, they led to physical battles, disagreements, accusations of heresy and being outside of the fold of the true religion. And a similar kind of thing can be found within Islam as well. The foundation of Islam is Tawheed. And Tawheed at its essence is very beautiful and very simple. But it is also very subtle, and it requires a great deal of contemplation, a great deal of study to be able to really understand the subtlety and the nuance of Tawheed. Just to give one example, in a hadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, every Muslim is familiar with the slogan of Islam, Allahu Akbar. And many times in English we translate Allahu Akbar as God is great. But the literal translation is God is greater, because Akbar is a comparative form. And then the question arises, what is God greater than? Allahu Akbar, God is greater, but what is he greater than? And maybe the first answer that will come to many people's mind is, well, God is greater than everything. God is bigger and better and more beautiful than everything. But then that is a comparison. And to say God is bigger than something or God is greater than something is to imply that God is kind of comparable. In some way, there is a similarity, because you can only compare things that have some level of similarity. They're both big, one is bigger. They're both good, one is more good, and so on. And so in the teachings of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that no, it's not Allahu Akbar min kulli shay, Allah is bigger than everything, but rather Allahu Akbaru min an yusaf. God is even bigger than to be imagined and to be described. That's just a beautiful expression of the subtlety of theological truth. It's not a simple belief in Tawheed that we can just understand on that simple level. So how do we approach theology? Something that is at once simple and at once complex, or at once subtle. Both of those aspects are true. One point is that most of the time, our concern is about what is right. So when we have a disagreement with a fellow Muslim or maybe a non-Muslim, we're thinking about who is right, what is the right belief, what is the right conception of monotheism, what is the right conception of the attributes of God. And there is a more important dimension than just what is right, which is the dynamic and the process of acquiring guidance and seeking guidance that a person has. Today, I don't know many things that I will learn gradually over time. And it's only with time, with experience, with study that I will be able to understand certain things. When we debate with each other and we discuss, and we're just focusing on who is right or what is right, then we often forget the fact that there is a process of acquiring knowledge. And one of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, which is not just important to seeking guidance, but also to preventing theological debates from becoming acrimonious and animosity filled, but rather enlightening, is to respect the process. So one hadith, this hadith has been quoted by different members of Ahlul Bayt. The form that I am going to mention is narrated from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He says that نحن النمرقة الوسطى بها يلحق التالي وإليها يرجع الغالي. Our teaching, Ahlul Bayt, our teaching is in the middle. And those who may have exaggerated beliefs, they come back to us. And those who may not have understood, they haven't come far enough in their understanding of theological or religious truth, they are going to come to us. What does that mean? And this is a philosophy of Ahlul Bayt, that we are not going to create polarization and just tell people what is true, even if it causes division or misunderstanding in society. We are going to create a process that gradually people can increase their religious knowledge. And if they're lacking something, they may have to come back, they may have to catch up, but over time, the dynamic is a healthy dynamic. So there is one other point that I wanted to make, but because I'm out of time, I will leave that to the question answer phase, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Sayyidna. Thanks for sharing this. And definitely, Ilm al-Kalam, which is the science of debate, was something that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam educated, his companions how to speak with logic and rational thinking. Companions by the name of Hisham ibn al-Hakam. I recall very quickly, I'll share a story. One time he was presenting an argument. He asked an alim from Basra, tell me, he was trying to prove the concept of imamat, and he was saying, can you tell me, do you have eyes? He said, yes, I do. What do you do with your eyes? He said, I see colors and I see people with it. Then he said, do you have a nose? What do you do with it? He said, well, I smell with it. Do you have a tongue? What do you do with it? He said, I speak with it. Do you have different parts of the body? He went on, do you have hands? Do you have feet? What do you do with it? And then he asked, do you have a heart? What do you do with the heart? So he said, well, with my heart, I distinguish everything that happens to my body parts. So in other words, my heart acts as a judge. And then, so he said, so can your body parts be independent of your heart? He said, no. And then he presented this, rational connection that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't leave our body parts without a leader, without an imam that guides the body parts, then how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leave an entire nation without an imam to address their concerns, doubts, and questions? And when Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam heard about this, this debate which Hisham ibn al-Hakam had, he said, where did he get this knowledge from? So he said, إِنَّهُ شَيْءٍ أَلَّفْتُهُ مِنْ أَقْوَالِكَ. This is something I have learned from you, O Imam. So the Imam responded and said, وَاللَّهُ هُوَ دِينُ اللَّهِ الَّذِي أَنزَلَهُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ. For surely this is the essence of the religion which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descended on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. That said, Shaykh al-Ninowy, please go ahead and share your perspective.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ورضي الله عن أزواجه وأصحابه وأحبابه والتابعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Very honored to be here with you today, alhamdulillah, and obviously with the Sayyid and yourself, and the topic could never be better, alhamdulillah, and Sayyidina al-Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Just like my colleague has mentioned, that really speaking about the Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad requires much more than simply maybe an hour to sort of just a little bit touch the surface of that personality and the depth and the breadth and the profoundness that this personality has. And like he also, I want to echo what my colleague also mentioned, the Honorable Sayyid, that also, like you also mentioned in your introduction, thank you very much for that, that Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad is really a point of a common link between all Muslims, whether they belong to the Shia or to the Sunni view. And from an Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah perspective, I can tell you that Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad is highly respected, alayhi wa ala abaihi salam. Now, approaching Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad, salamullahi ta'ala alayhi, like I said, is a bit difficult and challenging. So I want to sort of shed just lights on four corners, if you're to say, of the personality of Sayyidina Imam Jafar alayhi salam. And the first sort of gateway to understanding who Jafar ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam is the gateway of al-Itra. And as you know, obviously, Sayyid Imam Jafar is from an offspring of the Itra, offspring of the five who were cloaked. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam cloaked them with his garment, and he said, Allahumma هؤلاء أهل بيتي فأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. And Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad is the son of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, Baqir al-Ulum. And then Muhammad al-Baqir is no other than the son of Imam Zayn al-Abidin wa Sayyid al-Sajidin. Wa Zayn al-Abidin is no other than the son of Sayyid Imam al-Husayn al-Sibt al-Shaheed alayhi salam. And Imam al-Husayn is the son of Sayyidina Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Mawla al-Muwahhideen wa Sayyidatu Fatimatu al-Zahra ala jadd ala abiha wa alayha afdalu salati wa azka salam. So from this then the gate or the gateway of al-Itra, al-Tahira, we can understand where is al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad and where he is lined in that school or in that gateway if you go through the door of Itra. Another door or another gateway, another approach that we can go to al-Imam Ja'far also is through the gateway of knowledge. First of all, Imam Ja'far is the son of Imam al-Baqir, and his nickname al-Baqir, his name is Muhammad ibn Ali Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. He was called the Imam al-Baqir, nicknamed al-Baqir, for the vastness of the knowledge that he commanded. And notice now, you have Imam al-Baqir, the father of Imam al-Sadiq, and the father of Imam al-Baqir is Zayn al-Abidin, the heir of the ulum of Sayyidina Imam al-Husayn, Sayyidina Imam al-Hassan. So you see all these things now also accumulating in al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad, and one can comfortably say that al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad is one of the foundation of Muslim academia and Muslim history entirely, simply because of the environment that he was in, and obviously meritoriously based on what he had gained. Another also very important, so the other one is ilm now. The other one also that we can, a prelude to enter to understand the personality of Sayyidina Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad alayhi salam, is the gateway of reform, islah. In uridu illa al-islah mastata'at, as Allah says. And if you all recall, this was really the message of Imam al-Husayn in Karbala. His message was, I want to reform. I want to have a reform. I want to go back to the Quran. I want to go back to the ways of my grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Zayn al-Abidin took that reform as well after his father. Imam Muhammad ibn Ali also took that reform. Well, Imam Ja'far manifested that reform as well. And therefore, one can actually say that Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad, a prelude, a key to understanding his personality is through understanding it from the view of reform and how reform is to be done in a society that has different currents and all that, and what is a tayyar al-rashid, or the righteous path in dealing with different conflicting powers within society to try to bring it to the shore of safety. And the fourth key or prelude or fourth gateway that we can enter the arena to study the shakhsiyya or the personality and the impact of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad alayhi salam is from al-tazkiyah, from al-zuhd, from al-ihsan, from this high, massive spiritual atmospheres. Al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad was a symbol of what we call ilm al-tarbiyah wal-akhlaq today, the ilm of upbringing, of refinement, of purification of the heart, al-ta'abbud, ilm al-ihsan, the approach to Allah Azza wa Jal, علم الربانية ولكن كونوا ربانيين. Al-Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad was that symbol of the Rabbani approach to understanding this deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, to just so I don't get off topic, and I'll finish with that, maybe the time is up, but I thought these were important keys to understand who Sayyid Imam Jafar is, from the key of the itra, from the key of ilm, from the key of reform, and from the key of spirituality. And notice that's a comprehensive foundation to be engaged and engaging. We have a Zahid, one of the Zuhad, and also Mufassirin, Fuqaha, Hadith scholars, who is named Abu al-Qasim al-Qushayri. He has a book called the Risal al-Qushayri. He died year 465 of Hijrah. He narrated this from Imam al-Baqir, from Imam Imam al-Sadiq, Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And he said this in his Risala. He says, and I narrate through al-Baqir, through al-Sadiq, through al-Baqir. He says that Imam Ja'far said, من زعم أن الله في شيء أو من شيء أو على شيء فقد أشرك. Whoever claims that Allah is in something, or from something, or on something in the physical, literal sense, then he has associated Allah with the creation. And then he says, إذ لو كان على شيء لكان محمولا. For he continues to say, which means, for had Allah been on something literally in the physical sense, he would have been carried by it. وَلَوْ كَانَ فِي شَيْءٍ لَكَانَ مَحْصُورًا. And had Allah وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ been in something, he would have been confined by it. وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ لَكَانَ مُحْدَثًا أي مخلوقا. And had Allah been from something, he would have been a creation. And Allah is different from all that. That's the meaning of قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Surah Al-Tawheed. For whoever claims, as Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, whoever claims that Allah is in something, those who claim that Allah is in the skies or in heavens. Well, heavens are a creation of Allah. They existed. Allah created them. They were not existent before. And to say that the Creator, after He created the creation, dwelled in them, that's what Imam al-Sadiq is telling us, is actually associating the creation with the Creator. You all know the time and space dimension is a creation by Allah anyway. There was no time and there was no space, and Allah Azza wa Jalla huwa al-awwal wal-akhir, is the eternal. Whoever claims that Allah dwelled in the creation after willing to create the creation, he's actually not thinking of the Creator, he's thinking of the creation. And that's amongst the meanings of Tawheed that Al-Imam al-Sadiq re-emphasized, alayhi salam.
Thank you, Shaykhna. And I think, you know, the handful of gateways that you presented, if we were to spend all day discussing the different gateways, it would take us till the end of time and more. And this reminds me of the hadith by the Holy Prophet when he said, أَنَا مَدِينَةُ الْعِلْمِ وَعَلِيٌّ بَابُهَا. I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. And surely Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam is one of the gateways from the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. We will now move on to our second discussion, our second dimension, which is about the contribution of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam in Islamic fiqh, jurisprudence. His training and developing of qualified jurists and standing up against extremist groups and things like ghulu and liberalism. As we know, the Imam is most renowned as the initiator of Shia Islamic fiqh, known as al-Fiqh al-Jafari, the Jafari University. His extensive knowledge in a variety of fields had a great academic impact on the people of his time. And we have resources like At-Tawheed al-Mufaddal, which shows a compilation of his teachings, which reflected his extensive knowledge. I'll hand it over to Sayyid Sulayman to shed light on this topic.
Thank you, Sister. Jazakumullah. The debate that you mentioned actually with Hisham ibn al-Hakam, that was with Amr ibn Ubaid, one of the founders of what later came to be known as the rationalist or the Mu'tazili school of thought. And that's a very good illustration of the discussion that Shaykh also had and that I was also trying to present, which is the nature of the reform, which Ahlul Bayt and specifically Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam brought. That debate actually took place when Hisham ibn al-Hakam was very young. And there were other senior debaters, scholars present in the company of the I.M.A.M and even among the students and companions of the I.M.A.M. But Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam gave an honor to a young person. And this is one of the ways to have a dynamic relationship. So that was my earlier point about a dynamic relationship, and I want to extend that into the realm of jurisprudence. When we have different legal opinions and practice, sometimes, very commonly, people have this impression that multiple practice creates disunity. The biggest example is Eid. How many times have I heard people say, why don't all of the ulama just get together, make one declaration so there's no difference of opinion about whether the moon was sighted or not sighted? And the same thing applies to any other area of jurisprudence or law. Is particular food halal or haram? You know, can we slaughter our meat with a machine slaughter in this process or not? I want one answer. And the truth is that if we respect an academic discipline like law, like jurisprudence, then any scholarly discipline where we are all human beings studying, making a good faith effort, but nobody is perfect, there's going to be difference of opinion. So there's two extremes. One is where there's so many opinions that it's difficult even to make sense of what is right or wrong. And the other extreme is where we say we want to have a superficial unity, and therefore maybe there's just one official opinion. This is something that governments sometimes tried to do in the past. And even in our present time, we're going to impose this one fiqh or this one law on everybody. But what happens when you impose one law? Let me just give an example, and I know we have limited time, but to give an illustration. In biology, if you have a population of animals and you breed those animals for a desired trait, like horses or dogs or any other animal. So you breed that animal to give, for example, the most meat, if you're breeding, for example, cows, or chickens to give eggs the quickest and the most frequently. So you're reducing the genetic diversity of that population. You get effective product. You get more milk, more eggs, more meat, more quickly, faster horses, and so on. But what happens? When the genetic diversity of that population is reduced, it also means that species is more likely to go extinct, because sometimes climate changes, sometimes habitat changes. And when that habitat changes, if everybody just has one gene, they're not able to adapt. This is something that those of you who have studied biology, you are familiar with, maybe better than I am. But the same thing is true in our religious life. Yes, we don't want to have too many opinions. Fiqh and law are meant to organize our life. And so if you are praying Maghrib 4 rak'ah, God forbid, and I am praying Maghrib 2 rak'ah, and somebody is praying Maghrib 3 rak'ah, we're not going to be able to have a jama'at. So we do need to have structure, we do need to have unity. But at the same time, if we reduce the genetic diversity, what happens? Islam is going to confront new situations, new political situations, new social situations. And if everybody is just following the fatwa of one person, the approach of one person, then we lose that genetic diversity. If that point makes sense, and I took a little bit of time to give the example to make it clear, that was the wisdom of what Ahlul Bayt did. That they taught in a way that gave the essence of what is the teaching of Islam, but also encouraged people like Hisham ibn al-Hakam. And even from within the Shi'i Muslim tradition, there were theologians and there were fuqaha who disagreed with Hisham ibn al-Hakam very strongly. And they were opposing theological schools, including Hisham ibn Salim and others. And of course, among the broader Muslim community of scholars from other theological and legal schools, they also disagreed. The greatness of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam is that he had a message and a teaching for all of them. Abu Hanifa was a contemporary of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, and he had his own approach to law. He had his own approach to political reform. Both Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and Abu Hanifa, they both agreed that the government of the Abbasids and Mansur in particular was oppressive, but they had different approaches for how to reform that in terms of their law, in terms of their social practice. And yet, there was a cordial relationship and even a relationship of a teacher and a student between Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and Abu Hanifa. Similarly, there was a similar relationship of mutual respect between Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and Imam Malik bin Anas, the faqih of Medina. Malik himself says, Imam Malik says that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq used to give me a very special respect, even though Imam Malik was a full generation younger than Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. That was the ihsan, as Shaykh Ninowy spoke of Ahlul Bayt and of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, which allowed there to be disagreements and debates. Imam Malik disagreed in his approach with Imam Abu Hanifa, and both of them had their own approach distinct from the approach of Ahlul Bayt and some of the rulings and the teachings of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. But there was a cordial relationship. Sometimes among those people who are attributed to those teachers and those schools of thought, we don't have cordial relationships. But this is important for us to remember. As we honor those personalities, we have to also maintain that respect for differences of opinion. One part I mentioned, this is because we have to respect the process, the dynamic aspect of learning. Another point I want to make in terms of law. Many people think that you can only avoid disagreement if you water things down. You say that, these disagreements, how to do wudu, how to do salat, how to do tahara, how to determine what food is halal, there's always going to be disagreements, so it's not important. And that is the wrong approach. Islam is a holistic, a comprehensive teaching, and every brick is part of a beautiful whole. If you take a building and you remove some of the bricks, the whole building will become weak. If you take a beautiful work of art, like mosaic, and you remove some of the tiles and say they're not important, then that whole mosaic, that whole work of art will be compromised. Its beauty will be compromised. Its essence will be lost. So it is important for us to have those details. But it is also important for us to remember that those details are part of a scholarly tradition. They are to be approached with humility. And so if I have just 1 minute, let me conclude with a discussion between Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and one of his students.
Sure.
Now, he was at that time also maybe in his late middle age, and he came to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq with a question about Hajj. Those of you who've studied Hajj and maybe have gone for Hajj, it can be very confusing on how to do it properly. And so after he asked his question, he kind of expressed regret that, my teacher, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, I still don't understand how to do Hajj, and I've been studying it for 40 years. And Imam Jafar al-Sadiq gave a very important answer, which applies not just to Hajj, but to our relationship with law, with fiqh, with jurisprudence. The Imam said, this is a house that the angels used to worship before Adam was sent to this earth. This house is a symbol of the connection between earth and heaven. It is the house of God on earth, not because God has makan or zaman, but because there is a connection between heaven and earth, and it is through that connection that we can worship God and we can recognize God. So a house that has more ancientness, more sanctity, even than the existence of humanity on earth. Baytun hajjahu al-malaika qabla an yukhraqa Adam. How can I expect that 40 years I will be able to understand all of the rules? Have humility, have an understanding that we can never make a conclusive and a comprehensive understanding of fiqh, and I have the full haqq, or my school of thought has the full haqq, but don't water it down and say, therefore it's not important, do whatever you want. No, study it, value it, learn it, but don't limit it to my understanding or the understanding of my school of thought. Apologies, I took a few extra minutes.
Thank you, Sayyidina. And I just want to quickly highlight, an important point that you mentioned, the idea that generally speaking, human nature is destined to have disagreements. So even across different religions, we know that hadith from the Holy Prophet when he said that the Ummah al-Islam will be divided into 73 sects. And this is not just limited to Islam or Muslimin, but also the different religions. And hence, this reminds me of, in the words of a prophet when he said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent to exemplify pure character and morals and manners. And this is essentially what the Holy Prophet and all the Imams, and definitely Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, did when engaging in debate and discussion, that he was able to exemplify excellent manners, which actually attracted his listeners and followers.
And we shouldn't be afraid of that. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. This is part of God's creation.
Subhanallah. Shaykhna, tafadhal, you could go ahead to discuss this dimension.
When I think of Ahlul Kisa specifically, and then their followers, such as Al-Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad alayhi salam, alayhi wa alayhim ajma'in, afdal as-salah wa as-salam, I can't help it, but the ayah in Surah An-Nisa comes to my mind. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله والرسول أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. O you who believe, obey Allah, obey the Rasul, obey those who are أولي الأمر منكم. Now people will disagree about that, so let's move on. فإن تنازعتم في شيء, Al-Quran then goes to say, if you disagree about something, فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم مؤمنين. If you disagree about something, take it back to Allah and take it back to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This ayah, in my view, هذا أصلاً عظيم ومهجور. This ayah is a foundation. When you disagree with something, when you who believe. So I'm just echoing what the Sayyid mentioned and what the Honorable Sister mentioned as well. In the sense that when we disagree about something, Al-Quran can really put a path for validation and saying, all right, take it back to Allah, to the Quran and to our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which means the ways of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that we all agree on, not the ones that we disagree. But there is a whole big chunk that we all agree on. That forms a common standard. And I think Al-Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad alayhi salam stood from this perspective, on this foundation. And in this foundation, obviously, there's going to be variation in understandings, variation in the levels of knowledge, variations in the level of receptivity. And in this, we ought to encourage the clashes of the mind, not the clashes of the heart. The clashes of the mind bring out the best. And therefore, the intima wal intisar, the attribution and the belonging is lil Islami wahda. للدين وحده, that which Allah Azza wa Jal said, هو سماكم المسلمين من قبل, He named you Muslims. So then when our belonging becomes to al-Islam, and the priority becomes to the book of Allah Azza wa Jal and to the agreed upon sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this, our intima, our belonging to this foundation, taqdeeman wa ta'seesan in my view, which means as a priority, as a foundation, must be the basis from which where we start. And then where we disagree, let's say, on some of the things attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muslims disagree. Within the same group, they disagree. And intra-Islamically, they disagree. All right, that's fine. That's where we can encourage differences, and we can encourage them to substantiate it and substantiate their views through the Islamic etiquette based on the Quran and based on the agreed Sunnah. But this doesn't appeal to extremists in all groups and all sects, even if they agree to it theoretically. Why? Because the texts of the Quran and the agreed upon texts of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the agreed upon words of the Prophet ﷺ, are way inclusive, way merciful, way beautiful, caring about all people, inclusive rather than exclusive, and wishes good for all. As far as the things that the texts of the people, of me and you and other people, we are subject to the fallacies of human beings, and the imperfections of the human beings, sometimes tight-chestedness, sometimes lack of understanding, forgetfulness, etc., etc., etc. This is not to say, one, like the Honorable Sayyid mentioned, that one should not one should not belong to a school of thought. No. This is a natural human being capacity that Allah Azza wa Jal created, لِتَبَايُنْ فُهُومْ وَالْقُدْرَاتِ, because people's understandings and people's capacities are different. However, belonging to a school ought to lead us to actually have the thoughts fight each other, clash, in order to reach to the truth, not to belittle those who belong to other sects or other groups or other views, let alone insult or mock them. And obviously, needless to say, that differences in views ought to never lead to what I call intellectual terrorism, يعني إرهاب فكري, and to distorting the other's views. My father, Allah have mercy on his soul, I'll share something personal with you, and I'm sure all of you agree, it's a common sense thing. He would always say, strength is not to distort the opponent's points and present them, but strength is that you articulate your opponent's points in the best way he could articulate, then show that where it is imperfect. So it's important that when we disagree, that we don't distort the other's views and we reduce their presentation, nor do we assume legal guardianship over their mind, nor do we assume legal guardianship over the Quran or what the Prophet ﷺ authentically said. So all that is important. And therefore I say, al-Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad alayhi salam, from this basis then, showed us in a way that the zeal that extremists have for the deen is only superficial. Their zeal is for their own narrow-minded understanding of the deen, not the deen. And there's a difference between what the deen is, which is what Allah said, فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِ, what Allah Azza wa Jal said, and the indisputed prophetic tradition, and versus the interpretation of people. So I think with that, we can sort of have a prelude of entering the views of Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad. The Sayyid al-Khawi rahmatullah alayh, in his book Mu'jam Rijal Hadith al-Muhaddith, right, who died 1992 of Miladi, he narrated in his book, he says from Imam Jafar, he says, لا تقبلوا علينا حديثا إلا ما وافق الكتاب والسنة. Don't take from things that are said, attributed to us, except that which is consistent with the book and the prophetic agreed upon authentic sunnah. Why is that? Because that's the foundation upon which all is built. And that's why, for this very stand against extremism, Imam Jafar sustained lots of harm. And the extremists did not leave him alone, right? And you all know that. So I think I leave it there.
Thank you, Shaykh Jazakallah. And now we move on to the third and last dimension of our discussion. We are a little bit short in time, so I just want to remind our respected speakers if you can keep the answers a little bit more brief so that we can allow some time for questions. And I would like to also remind our respected viewers to please post your questions on the Zoom chat, and we'll take them after this discussion, which will be on highlighting the human values, morality, and self-identity in a multicultural society from the Seerah, the purified autobiography of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq. I'll hand it over to you, Sayyid.
Sure. And since I did take a little bit extra time last time, I'll shorten my remarks this time, inshallah. But just to continue where we spoke about, when it comes to the social and the political aspect, I think one of the key points that I would like us to take from this session, of course, is we want to spend more time learning about Ahlul Bayt. And I say that not from a Shi'i perspective or a Sunni perspective, but just from Islam. If you want to understand the message of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were many different approaches. Some people took a political approach, that we want to spread the flag of Islam to as many different places as possible. Some took a legal approach. Some took a theological approach. But it is only with Ahlul Bayt that you find an approach rooted in, number one, morals and akhlaq, and number two, that is comprehensive, that has reform, but that also has a recognition for the fact that reform is a generational process. It's not something that I can raise a slogan and I see so much corruption or evil in society and I say, I want to fix this in 5 years or in 10 years, maybe not even in 20 years. This is the obligation of our ummah. And of course, we hope that we are able to have effective actions, but we cannot rush Allah and His purpose. That is only something we get from Ahlul Bayt, a comprehensive approach to Islam and an approach that is rooted in akhlaq. And that is the point I want to conclude on. You know, there are, sometimes it is said that Judaism is a religion of orthopraxy. Judaism is not defined by discussions over theology. It is a religion that is defined by discussions over the correct application of the law. How strict are you in keeping kosher, for example? So that is said to be practice. Christianity is said to be a religion of orthodoxy, as I mentioned earlier, beliefs. What is the correct doctrine or belief? Islam has elements of orthopraxy and orthodoxy because we have aqidah and we have sharia and we have fiqh. But the basis of the life of this ummah and the basis of the unity of the Muslims, as you said, sister, and as we have discussed, and Shaykh has also discussed aspects of when it comes to doctrine, we will have disagreements, even in good faith. And some people don't have good faith. When it comes to practice and law, we will have disagreements, even in good faith. And then there are some people who don't have good faith. But even if everybody has sincerity and ikhlas and good faith, we will have disagreements. The basis of the hayat of this ummah and the basis of the unity of this ummah is akhlaq. And if we look at the Quran, for example, it's a very beautiful message in the Quran. لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ. The people of the book may wish that we are the special children of God, as they say. Or the Muslims may wish that we are the special servants of God. We will get a shortcut to heaven. And the Quran says, لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ. If you do evil, meaning if your akhlaq is not good, that is going to be accounted for by Allah. And this is why the Quran says that you have a special relationship with وَلَتَجَدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. Why is there a special connection between Christianity and Islam? Even though our theology is closer to Judaism, even though our practice, halal and haram, is closer to Judaism, but that أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً, it says, the Quran tells us that ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ مِنْهُمْ قِسِّيسِينَ وَرُهْبَانًا وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. It is an akhlaqi reason that brings the life of the ummah and the heart. And this is something that, forgetting labels of madhab and school of thought or school of law, but it is Ahlul Bayt that give us those dua, munajat, that depth of the understanding of the substance of Sharia and the spirit of Sharia. And this is the focus of Imam Jafar Sadiq. I will conclude. One of the famous statements of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, in a sectarian environment, you had the Murji'ah, you had the Khawarij, you had Ashab al-Ra'i, you had the early Mu'tazila, the beginnings of the Mu'tazila school. You had many different groups, and they would all call people. And you had the Abbasid movement, which has its own da'wah of a political nature. They called it a reformist nature. And Imam Jafar Sadiq says, "Kunu du'atan linnasi bighayri alsinatikum." Call people, but don't use your tongue. This is going to create many different debates, and it can also harm society. لِيَرَوْا مِنْكُمْ الْوَرَعَ وَالْإِجْتِهَادَ وَالصَّلَاةَ وَالْخَيْرَ. This is the foundation of Ahlul Bayt and their madhab. Before a particular doctrine of law or a particular doctrine of theology, to understand Ahlul Bayt, لِيَرَوْا مِنْكُمْ, let people see from you, wara', true piety and humility, wal-ijtihad, effort. I'm not trying to tell you, why are you wrong? Why is your madhab wrong? Why was your imam wrong? I have wara', I have ijtihad, as-salat, al-khair, I do good. And then the imam says, فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ دَاعِيَةٌ. That will call people, but on the basis of something that unifies and gives depth, and not just on the basis of a competition. Or in another statement of the same principle, the imam says that وَكُونُوا زَيْنًا وَلَا تَكُونُوا شَيْنًا. In your loyalty to your beliefs, don't be somebody that embarrasses your religion, your prophet, your imam. Be an adornment for your faith, not a disgrace for your faith. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Ahsan Sayyid. And I'll hand it over to Shaykh Na, if you can provide some input about this.
If we look at the deen in general, the deen, I look at it, consists of three things. Aqidah, articles of faith; fiqh, which is ahkam, law; and then ihsan, value system and ethics. And Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was not absent from this picture, where the deen was not just simply orthodoxy, let's say, which is belief, or an orthopraxy, which is fiqh, but also ihsan, iman, Islam, ihsan. And ihsan was the aspect of tazkiyah and purification that we mentioned, were one of the gateways to enter to understand the Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad alayhi salam. So therefore, the foundation of ihsan or tazkiyah or value system in times where these things are now rapidly evaporating was never absent from an Imam Sadiq. Al-Qadi Iyad, who died year 543 of Hijrah, mentions that Malik bin Anas, Imam al-Madhab, who died 179 of Hijrah, he says, لَقَدْ اخْتَلَفْتُ إِلَى جَعْفَرِ الصَّادِقِ. I visited Imam Ja'far many times, yani. فما كنت أراه إلا على ثلاث خصال. I only saw him on one of three states. إما مصليا, either he's praying, وإما صامتا, either he's silent, وإما يقرأ القرآن, or he reads the Quran. Notice now a preview to the house of Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad alayhi salam. And then Malik says, rahimahullah, وَلَا يَتَكَلَّمُ فِي مَا لَا يَعْنِي. And he never talks about something that does not concern him, that there's no benefit of, right? وَكَانَ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ وَالْعُبَّادِ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ اللَّهِ. And he was among those who were God-fearing, God-conscientious. And therefore Malik himself said, also Iyad mentioned that in Shifa, where Iyad says, كَانَ مَالِك إِذَا ذُكِرَ النَّبِيُّ صلى الله عليه وسلم يتغير لونه. Malik was, when the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم is mentioned, his color would change, he becomes pale, and he would put his head down so that it becomes difficult. So people asked him, they said, Ya Imam, you know, like this. He says, had you seen لو رأيتم ما رأيت لما أنكرتم علي ما ترون. Had you seen what I saw, Malik is telling his students, had you seen what I saw, you would have never objected to me. لقد كنت أرى جعفر بن محمد. I used to see جعفر بن محمد الصادق يعني عليه السلام. وكان كثير الدعابة والتبسم. And he would smile, and he was this light soul. يعني while he was reading, يعني he's reading the Quran or he's doing salah, etc. But he wasn't frowning. And when he sits, he smiles عليه السلام. He says, فإذا ذكر عنده النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. If you mention then the name of Rasulullah صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم, اصفر لونه. His face would turn yellow, pale. وما رأيته يحدث عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا على طهارة. And he was always on the highest level of طهارة, speaking about the Prophet صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وسلم. So these things, you see how Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad rahimahullah wa radiyallahu anhu wa alayhi salam was. الذهبي الحافظ mentions في تاريخ الإسلام, narrating from Imam Ja'far, he says, إياكم والخصومة في الدين. Be careful of these arguments in the deen, for it occupies the heart and it instills hypocrisy. And then he says, لا زاد أفضل من التقوى. Ja'far says, alayhi salam, no sustenance is better than the conscientiousness of Allah Azza wa Jal in your heart, the presence of Allah Azza wa Jal in your heart. He says, وَلَا شَيْءَ أَحْسَنَ مِنَ الصَّمْتِ. And nothing is more beautiful than silence. وَلَا عَدُوَّ أَضَلَّ مِنَ الْجَهْلِ. And no enemy is more misguided than ignorance. وَلَا دَاءَ أَدْوَى مِنَ الْكَذِبِ. And no illness more sick, no sickness is more sick than lying. These things that are narrated from Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad alayhi salam show us a reflection of the basic foundation of his tazkiyah and akhlaq and values in a time where, again, even that time, times are relative. When time was also not easy. Dhahabi mentions في السير and in the wasiyah of Imam Ja'far to Imam al-Kadhim alayhim as-salam. He tells him, Ya bunay, O son, man qana'a bima qusima lahu istaghna. Whoever is pleased with what Allah has given him, it doesn't mean you don't ask Allah for more, but you're pleased with Allah. You're not displeased with Allah. He says, whoever is pleased with Allah, Allah will enrich him or her. And whoever extends his eye to the hand, to that which is in other people's hands, will always die poor. Why? Because you're extending your hand thinking that, why don't I have what he has? Ask Allah and he will give you all. Anyway, to make the long story short, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad was an epitome of tazkiyah in his time, an epitome of akhlaq, a manifestation of the Muhammadan inheritance in his time, alayhi salatu wassalam. And therefore, you saw all this massive knowledge and tazkiyah and akhlaq emanating from him, alayhi assalam, and Allah Azza wa Jal gather us with him in the dunya and the akhirah.
Thank you, Ahsan Shaykhna. Thank you so much. And now we will move on to the last part of our program this evening, which is the Q&A session. I'd like to remind our respected viewers to please go ahead and post your questions on the Zoom chat. In the meanwhile, I will start by presenting one question, starting with yourself, Shaykhna. Being that we are speaking about Imam al-Sadiq, how can Imam al-Sadiq be a resource in unifying the Muslim community regardless of the fiqhi school of thought that they follow?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very good question. And I think the answer is what I sort of had said earlier about Surah An-Nisa. Look, fiqh is entirely speculative, almost, meaning the fiqh that's agreed upon, everybody agrees upon. Nobody says there's 7 salawat every day. Everybody says there's 5. Nobody says Maghrib, like the Sayyid mentioned, is 5 rak'ah or 2 rak'ah. Everybody says Maghrib is 3 rak'ah, right? So the basics of fiqh is agreed upon. The rest is speculative. It's not definitive. And that is something we understand also from the ways of Sayyidina Imam Jafar. Al-Imam Jafar alayhi salam teaches us that that which is definitive is definitive. That which is speculative, don't make it definitive, leave it speculative. There's room for then maybe seeing things differently. Unity does not mean conformity. Al-Imam Jafar alayhi salam himself disagreed with the approach of his own brother, for example, Imam Zayd. Disagreed with the approach of other Hashimi big scholars at that time. And that tells us one thing that's beautiful from the madrasa of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Unity does not necessarily mean conformity. Let's agree on the definitive foundation and let's then talk about the non-definitives.
Thank you, Jazakallah. And the next question I will pose to Sayyid Sulayman. For the one of the theological concepts which Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam educated on is the topic of al-Jabr wa tafweed, meaning predestination and free will, where the Imam alayhi salam said, "La aqulu bil Jabr wala bil tafweed, walakin amrun bayna amrayn." I neither say that things happen by force totally or that things happen by choice totally. However, it is a balance of both. So the question for the audience benefit, can you demonstrate the practical application of these words of wisdom of the Imam concerning the predestination of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala, where on one hand, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam says, Sha Allah an yarani qatila, Allah has destined for me to be a martyr. And on the other hand, he said, وَمِثْلِي لَا يُبَايَعَ مِثْلُهُ, someone like me cannot give the pledge of allegiance to someone like him, referring to Yazid. Jazakallah.
So this, of course, is a topic that takes a great deal of
very briefly
pages, in theology and in discussions, but very briefly, let me distinguish between Mashi'a, which is God's will in creation, in existence, and God's Amr, which is his command. When God commands something, that only is reasonable if we have the ability to follow or not follow. God does not command us to exist because we don't control our coming into existence. He may command us not to end our existence, not to end our life. But he only commands us to do something that we have the ability to do. If I cannot do it, or if I must do it, there's no point in having an amr, a command. But then beyond God's command, there is also a mashi'a, which is his will in existence. And the Ahlul Bayt, they explained, هُوَ الْقَادِرُ عَلَى مَا عَلَيْهِ أَقْدَرَهُم. Allah has the power over those things that he gave us the qudra, or the power to do or to not do. So when he gave us a command and then he gave us the power to do or not do something, he has the overall power over our free will and over the free will of others. Meaning, it's not like God gives us a tool and then we do that tool. You know how people have this fear that artificial intelligence is one day going to become so intelligent it's going to go against the inventor and it's going to end humanity. God did not give us a tool and then we overpower his hikmah or his qudra. هو القادر على ما عليه أقدره. God's mashi'a governs all things. Within his mashi'a, within his will in existence and in creation, he has given us free will. So it's not that we have predestination, meaning my choice is fake. But it's also not the case that I have free will and I can go out of the plan that God has. So when Imam Hussain alayhi salam, there is some debate about whether this statement, Inna Allah sha'a an yarani qatila or sha'allahu an yaraka qatila is true or not. I don't want to enter into the debate about the authenticity of those words. The principle is accurate. It was the mashi'a of Allah for Imam Hussain to be martyred, or nobody could martyr him, even if the entire world had come together. That was against the command of God, but it was within the plan of God. And that's just not a perfect answer because I want to be brief, but that's a brief answer.
Thank you, Jazakallah. We do have a question coming in through the chat. The sister is asking, and this question is for Sheikh. Can you briefly, in just a few words, review the definitions of, and compare and contrast the definitions of Iman, Islam, as well as Ihsan, in the viewpoint of the Imam alayhi salam?
Well, I look at, from the narratives, I look at Iman as the ayahs. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله. Right? واليوم الآخر. So we believe in all these five, right? بالله وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر. Right. As far as Islam, after the Shahada is إقامة الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وصوم رمضان وحج البيت. As far as Ihsan, as the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned, is that you worship Allah as if you are seeing him. If you are not seeing him, he is seeing you. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. And that's the aspect of tazkiyah and akhlaq, and being in the presence of Allah Azza wa Jal, and being conscious of Allah Azza wa Jal, and living your life as such. These are, and this is in brief what I view Islam and Iman and Ihsan and that.
Thank you, Jazakallah. And we will take one more question. There's no more questions on the Zoom chat, but I will present this question to Sayyid because I think it's really important. So narrations say that, you know, the last piece of advice which Imam Jafar al-Sadiq gave before he passed away was that he said to the Ummah, لَن تَنَالُوا شَفَاعَتُنَا مُسْتَخِفٌ بِالصَّلَاةِ. Our intercession will not be attainable by those who take the matters of prayers, salah, lightly. So Sayyid, can you explain exactly what does it mean, mustaqifun bis-salah, especially to the youth and in this age and time where it's a very fast-paced environment. A lot of people are constantly, you know, in a rush, you know, in the very busy engagements of life. What exactly is mustaqifun bis-salah, and what is some few tips to avoid being mustaqifun bis-salah?
Sure, and I would like to begin by thanking you, sister, for excellent moderation, and Sheikh for your wisdom and your insights, and apologies if there were any shortcomings on my part. I won't speak to the youth or to others. I'll speak to myself because I need to hear this message more than others. But there are two challenges that we have. One is the challenge of not praying. And then there is the challenge of praying and taking our prayers lightly. And both of them are istighfaf. Istighfaf means to take something and not take it seriously. So for some of us, that might be that we are not regular about our prayers, and maybe we need to be more careful and more regular not to miss our prayer. In the time of the Prophet and the early generations of Muslims before electricity, it was often Salatul Isha. People would wake up for Fajr because that was the best time of day. But Salatul Isha, it was dark and it was late. People would have dinner, they were tired, they would fall asleep. And maybe they wouldn't wake up again until after midnight. In our time, most of us were awake for Salat al-Isha,
Right.
but Salat al-Fajr often is difficult sometimes in the summer for people to wake up and to pray it on time. Whichever prayer it is. Sometimes it was also, there is debate about Salat al-Wusta, Dhuhr or Asr, because it was a busy time in the day. So they would miss Salat al-Dhuhr or Salat al-Asr. In any case, the first step is let's make sure we pray. And then, as the Quran says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. There are some people who pray, but their attention is somewhere else. Just like if I'm the kind of person who I will sin when I'm alone, but if I'm with somebody, I won't sin. What does that mean? It means, as hadith tell us, that جَعَلْتُ اللَّهَ أَهْوَنَ النَّاظِرِينَ إِلَيَّ. I'm embarrassed when you're with me, I'm not going to sin. But Allah is always with me, and I made it seem as if He is the least of my concerns. When it comes to prayer, if God is calling me, if somebody important is calling me, I'll answer. But if God is calling me, I'll say, Ya Allah, you can wait. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to change our schedules. Salat should be an anchor, not an afterthought. Don't call it your lunch break and you're going to pray on your lunch break. Call it your salat break and you're going to pray, you're going to eat lunch in your salat break. And you make it psychologically an anchor in your day. The other thing, and I don't want to take up too much time, that I find helpful is we have nawafil. And the reason for the nawafil, they're not required. But the reason is, according to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, they complete the shortcomings in our wajib prayer, our regular prayers. So the best thing that can help us take our prayer seriously and connect to God in our prayer is what we do outside of our prayer. If my whole day is concerned about entertainment or money or anything other than God, there's nothing I can do for 5 minutes that's going to allow me to be concentrating in my prayer and to have tawajjuh. But if the rest of my day I'm careful of God, I want to have fun, but فيما يحل ويجمل, as the hadith of Amir al-Mu'minin says, my entertainment is also halal and it is jameel, it is worthy of a mu'min. I want to earn money, but I care about God. When I'm thinking of God throughout my day, then when I come to the 5 minutes of salat, I will also be able to concentrate better.
Thank you, Sayyid. Jazakallah. And we are up in our time. As we conclude this evening's webinar, on behalf of the I.M.A.M organization, I'd like to thank our respected panelists and guest speakers for your time and valuable contribution in helping us recognize some of the accomplishments of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam, which is merely a drop in the vast ocean. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your efforts in propagating ulum Ahl al-Bayt. I'd like to also thank our dear viewers and audience for sharing your time with us this evening. And we look forward for your attendance in future webinars and events, inshallah. Once again, Mubarak to all of you, and please don't forget us in your du'as. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Ah,
أحسنتم.